So today we're making a brand new tier list, ranking every meta unit in Anime Last Stand as of the most recent Halloween update. I hope you guys find the video helpful. If you do, maybe leave a like or subscribe. But anyways, let's get into it. My last tier list video was the Godly Naruto update, and we got a lot of changes to the meta since then. Take this list with a grain of salt for sure. Probably gonna take a couple tier list videos to get these rankings fully ironed out. Otherwise, we have the same tiers I always use of Meta Overall, Meta Infinite, Meta Early, Support, Good, and Farms. I got the Farms out of the way because those are very self-explanatory. Let's move on to the actual rankings. First, we have all the new Halloween people. We have a lot to talk about here. But I want to keep this video pretty short if I can, because most of you guys just skip to the end anyway. So I'll give a pretty brief explanation for what these units do. Of course, I always have showcases and even a very detailed video for Mob, if you're wondering what they all do. First up, we have the guy from Soul Eater. I think his name is Asura. This guy is really strong, Meta Overall for sure. Perfect Seal, full AoE. He has a way of gaining infinite damage if he kills bosses and mini-bosses. And he does also have a very strong nuke, scaling off the total damage he does, and he has access to Pressure and Despair. Overall, very strong, and probably the best unit in the game for the Halloween event. And then we have Light Yagami, or Kira. This guy is very expensive, pretty much only usable in Infinite, but probably the best Infinite unit in the game. He has a bunch of nukes, he has a passive that is going to auto-execute stuff below 15% HP, well, up to 15% HP depending on like one of his bars that he builds up. One of his abilities is a guaranteed one-shot, and then he has another ability that can reset cooldowns, including his own, which means if you use him right, he can have 2 guaranteed map wipes, which is very strong for Infinites. His only drawback is his cost being very expensive, so... Then we have Judar, which is probably the worst unit from the Halloween update. He's not bad, he has pretty good damage, he has 4 different modes that he changes between from his ability. He can only have like 1 mode at a time, and otherwise he is neutral element, so... I don't know, he's kinda okay, he's a heal unit, pretty alright, but not the best damage ever, and kinda situational, you have to manually toggle between his abilities, so not good for AFKing. Now for Mob, I have an entire video on this guy, and why he's so broken, but he's definitely probably the 3rd best unit of the update, I would say, very strong, going in Meta Overall for sure. Takes a while to fully ramp up with his emotion bar and everything, but he has access to a lot of different supporting stuff and really crazy damage, very strong. Now for Lelouch, or Lulu, I personally think this is the best unit of the update, and currently probably the best unit in the game. I'd recommend you check out my showcase video for this guy, but he has a very strong summoning passive that is going to scale off enemy HP. He also has a little bit of a buff to other allies in his range, and he is Dark Element so he can hold the Soul of Intimidation. I don't really see this guy ever getting power crept. I mean, he's got 2 of the strongest abilities in the game, and in my opinion the strongest passive in the game with his summons. Lulu is extremely good for everything, and yeah, top of the game in my opinion. Alucard. I'm pretty sure this was supposed to be the main unit of the update, because he's like an Abyssal Trial or whatever. He has a pretty complicated design. He takes a while to like fully ramp up with his different restriction levels or whatever. He's a really good bleed buffer and really good damage dealer himself. Definitely put him in Meta Overall for sure. But I personally don't think he's that crazy though, because of how his restriction levels work. You actually have to ramp him up, and he can't reach all of them completely solo. You have to bring like a Despair unit with him. If you run him in the right team, he can be really good, but otherwise not too crazy. And we also got some old unit buffs this update. We got Guts and Rukia. I don't think too much changed for Guts, he's still going in Meta Overall. He pretty much got a damage buff on all upgrades and then a range buff on his final 3 upgrades. And then Rukia, a lot changed for her. She has really good damage now because one of her passives that used to like reduce her damage by a lot doesn't reduce it by as much anymore. She's really good for full AoE damage now, and Frostbite and Blizzard. Throw her into Meta Overall for sure. Now for the Final Fantasy people from the previous update, we have Cloud. And Cloud's actually really good for raw damage. He also has access to a ton of different debuffing, like damage over time effects, so very good. And if I remember correctly, he also has a very strong nuke. So he's really good for everything, definitely going in Meta Overall. Probably above Alucard here. Sephiroth also has really good DPS, especially with his mini nuke ability on auto. He has like a repeatable nuke with really good scaling. Then he has a couple different effects he can gain, mostly like damage over time stuff. I think he has like Mutilate and Bolt and Bleed. But then he also has like Freeze, Wind Shear, and Pressure, so... Or I think Pressure, I'm not sure if he has Pressure. Might need to fact check that one. But he has a little bit of supporting stuff there. He's definitely going in Meta Overall, and probably right above Cloud in my opinion. I think this girl's name is Aerith, and she's actually a really good support. She's a pretty nice damage buff, but her most important thing in my opinion, she can reduce other units' ability cooldowns by I think 15 seconds per activation of her passive. Any ability that you can use multiple times is very good with her, because she can reduce their cooldown. She's definitely going into a good spot in the support tier. And then Miyabi, the floor 50 infinite castle unit, also a support I would say. She has like different follow-up attacks for other units in her range. Whenever something attacks, there's a 10% chance she's going to follow-up attack. And the follow-up attacks are actually really good. She has access to like Frostbite, Brittle, Freeze, Pressure, Daze. You can think of a lot of stuff she has. She also is full AoE and has, I think, Frostbite on base by herself. Her damage is also pretty good, definitely going in a good spot in support here. The Battle Pass guy, Afro Samurai. Such a pretty okay bleed unit, a lot of like bleed related passives and everything. I think he applies like Dismantled, if I remember, or Hemorrhage, something like that to bleeding stuff. He's a little bit like Alucard in the way that he does really good damage on the right team, but usually not too crazy. Next up we have the Naruto people, which means we're getting into the stuff I've already talked about before. From this point onward, I probably won't go into too much detail, unless they're like godly units or something. But Pain is just going in the good tier. He has summons and a little bit of supporting stuff, but he's not that crazy. The godly Naruto, of course meta overall. He has a really good godly lead, really good damage across all upgrades. He has pretty strong abilities when maxed out, and overall, one of the best units in the game right now. For Sasuke, I definitely think I underrated this guy before. He has really good damage with Black Flame, and some very versatile abilities if you know how to use them, so definitely going in meta overall, and decently high in it. The Celestial Being guy, he's just going in good tier. He has like 2 different forms that are pretty cool. He has a lot of different supporting passives as well. He's pretty good for burst DPS, but he's just going in the good tier. And then we have another Naruto unit that I think I underrated before, Boruto. This guy has really good damage, especially for being Perfect Seal. He has access to a bunch of different debuffing status effects that are pretty good for supporting. He's definitely going into meta overall. Not too high in it, but he can be pretty crazy. Orihime is just a flat damage buffer. Pretty good one though if you build her right. And again, just a good full AoE damage dealer. Not too crazy, he does have some debuffs, but going in the good tier. Rengoku also going in the good tier. Very good burn damage dealer, but you have to run him on the right team. Kokushibo going in the good tier as well. Akaza also going in the good tier. His DPS is very reliant on enemies walking faster, so there are some maps where he's very good. But otherwise he's kinda okay most of the time. Shinobu has some okay damage and pretty good debuffs, but she's not that crazy. And then Sleeping Thunder, Flaming Thunder God. Also going in the good tier. Pretty good for Bolt and Electrified DPS. Soifan going into meta early. Very cheap, pretty good damage on placement, and has a pretty good supporting passive as well. Shinji going into the support tier. He's a pretty complicated unit, but overall has a lot of enemy walkback and debuffing. Yamamoto can be good for burn damage. Raijo, not that good. Pretty okay full AoE damage. Aizen's going into the support tier. He does have pretty good personal damage and could arguably be meta overall, but most of the time you want to use him for a debuff, making enemies take a lot more damage. Okura is going towards the bottom of meta overall. He still just has a lot of raw damage. Tattooed Alchemist going into meta early. Very cheap placement cost, very good damage, and a lot of enemy debuffs. And King going into the good tier. He does have really high single target DPS and is good for boss killing, if you use him right. He's a pretty conditional unit though. Flame Alchemist going into meta early for cheap hybrid damage. Edward has an okay damage and range buff. Killua, pretty okay DPS. Yappy's going into the good tier. He does have good enemy debuffs, but just kinda okay damage. Gyra has a really good range buff, and I think he also buffs dot damage. Funny Valentine, pretty good raw damage with all of his clones. Wonder Review definitely meta overall, still really good for everything. Enemy debuffing, map-wide damage. Frollo going into meta infinite because he can copy other people's abilities. Johnny definitely going into meta overall. He's still kinda comparable to Naruto for the best godly in the game. Pretty okay godly lead, very cost efficient DPS, very versatile abilities and good supporting passives. Ahsoka, pretty good for slowing down and reversing the enemies. Gon is still meta infinite for his nuke. Yamato, pretty okay raw damage and has Blizzard. Shanks is pretty good for stunning and reversing enemies. Mihawk meta early, cheap hybrid damage with lots of range. Merlin has a lot of like elemental buffing stuff, pretty weird unit. Frieren definitely still meta overall. Mostly used for her supporting passives, but still has really good damage and pretty strong nuking abilities. Fern is pretty good for raw damage from her ability. Delta meta early, full AoE cheap hybrid damage. Virgil meta infinite for his nuke. Dante good for raw damage. Makima meta infinite for her nuke. Nami meta early for cheap hyper damage and pretty good supporting passives. Aki meta infinite for his chance to one-shot stuff. Denji pretty good raw full AoE damage and can be pretty good for boss killing, but overall kind of fell off compared to other godlies. Heliotis meta infinite for his nuking abilities and some pretty okay supporting passives. Megumin meta infinite for nuking. Angel meta infinite for nuking and pretty okay raw damage. Now for Gilgamesh, he is still pretty high in meta overall. Pretty okay godly lead, very good supporting passives, pretty good raw damage and very strong nuking abilities, but I would definitely say they're better godlies now. Noelle meta early, cheap hybrid water damage. G-Suite's kinda like Miyabi, really good follow-up attacks for the strongest unit in his range. Juno meta early, cheap hybrid damage and slow. Caster Saber is a damage buffer. Julius meta infinite for his nuke. Madoka meta infinite for her nuke. Bone Demon meta early, cheap hybrid damage. Nature Shinra meta infinite for his nuke. Neutral Shinra meta infinite for his nuke, that also rewinds enemies and resets cooldowns. Kirito, just pretty okay raw damage. Ichigo still meta overall, really good raw damage for how cheap he is, and he's still especially a really good boss killer. Death the Kid meta early, cheap hybrid damage. Wukong definitely meta overall. It does take a while to fully get him going, because of his clone fusion, but he does have really good raw damage and abilities, and he does have a pretty okay galley lead for tournaments. The Immortal King, meta infinite. He has like a map wipe nuke, and an ability reset, and a walkback ability. Escanor definitely meta overall. He has really high raw damage, and pretty okay buffs to fire or burn units. Quincy King, fully AoE better fear, and a damage and range buffer. Dio is arguably meta overall, because he has pretty good raw damage on all upgrades, but I feel like nowadays he's mostly used as a support for reducing SPA, and really good time stops as well. Cosmic Garo, the unit himself really fell off, but in my opinion he is still a good Galu lead. He has a huge buff to both crit rate and crit damage, which is overall like the best damage buff in the game for raw DPS units. Saitama, meta infinite for his nukes. Tier 5 Luffy is kinda weird. He's still pretty okay for his Galu lead, he is really good for progressive content. He has pretty good supporting passives and various debuffs, but his damage kinda fell off and he's very expensive, so I feel like most of the time he's meta infinite for his nuking ability. Sung Jin Woo, I feel like this guy's kinda fallen off, because like, you have to actually get kills with him to ramp him up and get his passives going. And there hasn't been much hard content where his like one-shot nuke is actually usable. He's definitely still meta overall, but probably going right about here. Giorno meta infinite for his rewind ability. Gogeta meta infinite for his percent-based damage nuke to bosses. Irwin is just a damage buffer. Buff mode Kurumi is a damage buffer with a pretty long time stop. Yuta definitely still meta overall. He has pretty good damage, especially because he can copy other units' damage as well. He also has some good supporting stuff with Rika, and a very good progressive content nuke. Judge Guy is just an okay debuffer with the extinguish effect, pretty high uptime. Maki is the top of meta early, very good hyper damage on placement for very cheap. Sukuna meta infinite for his nuking abilities. Shadow definitely going in meta overall. He's really good at everything for like raw damage, nuking once you max him out. His most important thing in my opinion is the permanent despair passive, which is really good. Law is pretty good for rewinding enemies. Ultra Instinct Goku. I have him on here because he's a godly, and I want to rank him so people know if they want to go for him, but he really fell off, he's not that good. Pretty okay raw damage and an okay nuke, but for a godly, he's honestly really bad now. Yujo takes a lot of setup to actually even use, so definitely going into meta infinite, but pretty strong full AoE damage and abilities. Chidori meta infinite for boss killing. Dark mode of Griffith, pretty okay meta infinite for raw damage. Light mode of Griffith is in my opinion the best damage buffer in the game. Gojo is pretty good for time stopping, nuking, and slowing down enemies. And finally, Uchi. This guy just has pressure, and an ability that resets cooldowns and rewinds enemies. He's going like right here, in support. And now we should finally be done. And these tier list videos are always a lot of talking. Well, here we have the final rankings. Everything here is just my opinion, of course, so take it all with a grain of salt, and feel free to let me know what you think in the comments down below. Anyways, thank you to my channel members for making this video possible. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope to see you in the next one. And have a great day.